Thanks for clicking! Canada's real estate market could have a banner year in 2025. This according to a number of media appearances by the legend himself, LePage CEO Phil Soper.
The secrets this guy has.
Indeed, from Bloomberg's most recent interview with Soper to the Toronto Star's interview with Soper, where he predicted a Toronto market boom in 2025, to the Star's expose on first-time homebuyers, in which the Star referenced its own interview with Phil Soper as proof that bidding wars could be making a return in 2025. The Star referenced an interview with itself as proof. What the
Only I didn't say fudge.
But yeah, you get the idea. Soper is getting a lot of screen time for his end-of-year predictions. Now, one of the things that they teach you in post-secondary education is to double-check the validity of your sources.
They do?
It's true. In fact, according to the writing program at Harvard University, every paper should evaluate its sources and decide whether or not it's appropriate to use that source in its paper. As such, let's do a service for the media by evaluating Phil Soper as a source of predictions, mainly by seeing what life would have been like had you have listened to Phil Soper.
That's not good.
So what I want to do today is go over Phil Soper's most recent interview with Bloomberg, then take a look at what your financials would look like had you have listened to the advice from Phil Soper since midway through the pandemic, and then discuss some implications. As we'll see today, despite the certainty with which the mainstream media makes its predictions on Canada's real estate market, the future remains and always has been uncertain. We will continue to track that market on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this interview. On to the interview. First off, Bloomberg asked Soper to give an interview as to where the market has been.
But broadly speaking, house prices peaked in early 2022.
Yes, exactly. And then as interest rates rose, depending on where in the country, they either treaded water or even gave back a little bit in our two most expensive cities, Toronto and Vancouver.
So, according to Soper, following the pandemic boom, prices treaded water or gave back a little bit. Well, Canada's peak benchmark price was $835,000 in February of 2022 and is now sitting at $717K. Almost 3 years later, a $118,000 loss, about 15%.
Just a flesh wound.
Maybe Soper just means Toronto, which had a peak benchmark price of $1.376 million in March of 2022 and is now sitting at $1.06 million, a $316,000 difference or a 26% loss.
It's nothing. What are you going to do with that?
Now, maybe a 26% loss isn't a whole lot, and I'm just arguing semantics. Let's discuss this with LePage of 2021, which had predicted a strong real estate market for 2022, with prices set to increase by 10.5%. So, in 2021, a 10.5% increase in prices was going to be an unusually strong market, but fast forward to 2024, and a 25-26% decrease is just pulling back a little.
That's just a straight shooter.
So, there is a bit of a mismatch between words and numbers, and even more as we'll see later. So that's Phil Soper's accounting of the past. Let's see how well he's done in the past at predicting the future. Let's start our journey on listening to Phil Soper back in summer of 2021. I'd start earlier, but if you Google Phil Soper, there isn't a whole lot on him in 2020. It's like he just appeared out of nowhere in 2021, and now we have ourselves a Soper.
I was better because of it.
Speaking of appearing and disappearing, Soper gave a quote back in, if I remember correctly, June of 2021 to MoneyWise, encouraging young people to take a look at variable rate mortgages, noting that in the long run they perform better than fixed. However, the link to that article now points to something that was updated in October of this year, which no longer has any mention of Phil Soper. The article in question was also found in the National Post, but that link has been taken down as well. So I went a bit further and checked the National Post link on the Wayback machine, and that link has been excluded from the Wayback machine as well. Then on a lark, I tried the Wayback machine on the MoneyWise link, and yes, it was June of 2021. So, were it not for the Wayback machine, we'd have almost no recollection of that article and of Phil Soper's stellar advice in June of 2021.
I didn't know anything about that.
So we'll be that young home buyer. Let's say we read that advice in June of 2021, took it to heart, went out in July, and bought at a purchase price of $692,000. Now, since I'm a young person, I probably had minimum down payment requirements, so we'll throw those numbers into the mortgage insurance calculator. And with mortgage insurance, I had a mortgage of $675,584. Let's also say I got that variable rate mortgage from TD at prime minus 0.9 instead of the 2.44 that was available at the time. I'm taking Phil Soper's advice. I'm going to save myself an extra 1% by not taking a fixed, and we're off to the races.
Smart.
So let's put all of that information into CMLS's variable versus fixed calculator. We'll include all of the rate hikes and rate cuts that happened since. And at the end of that year 3 as a young person, I've now paid $81,000 in interest on that variable versus the $47,000 I would have paid with fixed. So as a young person, having listened to Phil Soper midway through the pandemic, I'm now down $34,000. Regardless, while that $34K might seem like a big loss right now, let's move to the end of 2021 for another Soper prediction, when, even pre-Russia invasion, Canada's inflation had just come in at 4.7%. And even the village idiot knew that rates were going up and going up quickly.
You think you're better than me?
On the same day of that CPI release, December 15th, LePage told us that prices were going to rise by 10.5% the following year, with Soper saying that signals were pointing to demand continuing to outstrip supply. So, hearing that, I go out the following month and buy that benchmark price home for $810,000 in January of 2022. Almost 3 years later, that same home is now worth $716K, nearly a $100,000 loss.
Gave back a little bit.
But maybe I didn't buy a benchmark price home. Maybe I wanted to really make it big and bought myself a GTA condo, which, according to LePage, was expected to appreciate faster than a detached. So, January of 22, I went out and grabbed myself one of those medium-priced townhouse condos at $900,000. 2 years later, it's worth $741K.
Either treaded water or even gave back a little bit in our two most expensive cities, Toronto and Vancouver.
You!
So, I lost about $34K listening to the advice in June, and depending on when and what I bought, I lost between $100 and $160K based off that advice 6 months later.
We need your help.
But what about 2022? Let's move forward to December of 2022, when LePage forecasted that though house prices would be down 1% in a year's time, when interest rates stabilized, buyers would be jumping back in the market. Thus, out of a fear of missing out, I jumped in January of that year, buying a benchmark price home for $712K. Now, about 2 years later, that home is now worth $716, gaining me about $5,000 in profit, about a 6% increase in 2 years, and I had the pleasure of paying a 5.7% interest rate, so I didn't miss out on that process.
You're welcome.
Definitely better than that $100,000 to $150,000 modest loss that I had in 21, but still not great. So let's fast forward to one more year. Let's go back to December of 2023, back when Phil Soper told us that house prices were going back to their pandemic peaks in 2024. And just a note on that article, it's not available either, with Bloomberg having removed the post. Seems like a lot of Phil Soper's timely and prescient advice appears to get removed from the internet, which is odd considering how much the news media thinks of him, with BNN Bloomberg having him on no less than 5 times in the past year. Regardless though, in January of this year, we rushed in hoping to reap the rewards of those pandemic price gains, purchasing at $721,000. Fast forward to now, and as mentioned, we're at $716K, which equals about a $5,000 loss. Really not that much on the Soper scale. That's a trademark. So if I took Soper's advice in mid-2021 and only right then, and I didn't continue to take it, I lost about $34,000. If I took it at the end of 2021, I've lost between $100,000 to $160,000 depending on the home that I purchased. If I took it in 2022, I'm up about $5K, but I'm paying a lot in interest to do so. And if I took it in 2023, I'm down about $5,000.
Either treaded water or even gave back a little bit in our
So his past predictions haven't been that great. His descriptions of the past haven't been overly apt. What about his descriptions of the future? Well, as we talked about before on this channel, Phil Soper described the future renewal wave as follows on Bloomberg.
We're over halfway, considerably over halfway. We'll be 3/4 of mortgages written during those pandemic lows will have rolled into post-pandemic rates by the end of 24.
So the renewal wave, according to Soper, is over, and according to basically anyone else, the Bank of Canada, CMHC, everyone, no, it is not. So, in summary, Phil Soper's description of the past isn't overly apt. His predictions in the past did not come to fruition. Had you have listened to many of them, you would have lost a fair amount of money. And his description of the future, again, isn't overly apt either. Yet, the news media continues to use him as a reference, as a source for predictions heading into 2025.
Does a pretty good job, eh?
And I bring all of this up. I go through this whole exercise not just to poke fun at Phil Soper, though that is the enjoyable part of it. No, I bring it up because I think it tells you everything you need to know about the media. They've consistently gone to this source for the past 3 years, who has been consistently wrong for the past 3 years, and said source is still used as a medium of prediction going into 2025. Most people, in the market at least, cannot be continually bad at their job, if say the job is making a prediction on the market, and continue to keep it.
I can do it.
But there must be something about Phil Soper, something about Royal LePage that keeps the media going back to the well. I'm not going to speculate what that something is. You can figure that out for yourself. But as we've seen, if the past or the future is any guide, take all of these predictions with a grain of salt. We will obviously continue to track Canada's real estate market on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates. But for now, thanks so much for watching.